Welcome to the HJ Talks About Abuse podcast, the podcast where we talk about sexual abuse cases in the hope that it will assist listeners in openly discussing topics which have been ignored for too long. This podcast is brought to you by the abuse team at Hugh James. We are lawyers, so we tend to speak about the legal aspects of abuse cases, but we aren't too shy to speak up about the broader issues faced by survivors of sexual abuse too. We hope that you find it interesting, but more than that, if you are a survivor of sexual abuse, we hope that you find our discussion empowering. Hello podcast listeners, my name is Alan Collins. I'm the head of the abuse team at Hugh James, and I am joined by my colleague Danielle. Hi Danielle.
Hi Alan.
Danielle, you've come up with an interesting subject for this podcast, deepfakes. And I wanted to say deepflakes. Well, of course, that was a subject for another podcast. But anyway, getting back to deepfakes. So can you explain to me and our listeners what deepfakes is all about?
Yes, of course. So deepfakes is now a technology, so artificial intelligence technology that you can use on your phone or any sort of digital device you have, where you take a picture of someone, whether that yourself, whomever, and you can upload it onto other pictures, videos, films, moving characters. So, examples are you can then put yourself into a music video, or you can be, sat on Harry Potter's wand, or anything really.
So someone could take a photograph of me, they say, oh, that's a very handsome I really, really am envious of how he looks. Let's take Alan's photograph of his face and substitute it for whatever.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's an element that, I've seen these on the internet myself. And before I really looked into the detriment side that we'll talk about, some of these are quite funny. You have people dressed as the elf at Christmas, for example, and, as I say, you're in one of your favourite films, or, your parents are in some 80s, 70s film. So there's an element of it that is quite comical.
Yeah, which reminds me, a couple of weeks ago, all over social media was the footage of a Chambers Court hearing in the United States, where one of the attorneys was appearing with the facial features of a cat, and the judge was very seriously trying to get the attorney to understand that all the judge could see was the body of the advocate, but with a cat face. And you then had the lawyer explaining that he didn't know how to get rid of the cat face. So it was funny in a very serious situation.
Yeah, that video I'm sure most of our listeners will have seen, because it went viral, probably because the lawyer in question felt he needed to explain to the judge that he wasn't a cat, which I felt we all probably realised. So yeah, this is basically the technology that has come in. But what I didn't realise is I thought you had to upload, effectively a selfie, and then you added it into the script of how this worked. But it's not. You can screen grab any image of anybody, that's available to you on the internet, your friends' Facebooks or any other social media where, a lot of people put a lot of images of themselves these days. So it's available to everybody.
And like a lot of this new technology, all these new developments in technology, it's ripe for misuse and exploitation.
Yeah, so when I started looking into this, because I knew we were going to do a podcast on it, there were things that were coming up, such as, politically. So people had put Donald Trump's face and Barack Obama's voice on different things. So there was a political spin of it. We've seen, especially this year, Boris Johnson has been put on a number of different types of artificial intelligence type scripts, so we can see him saying different things. So that's one element. But then, it started to affect celebrities as well. So, one of the major names is Taylor Swift. She was placed in basically a pornography video, and the statistics on that, the download for that was, I think it's in 8 weeks, over 90,000 people watched that video, which must be incredibly upsetting for her family.
It's extremely upsetting. It's exploitation. That's the that must be the appropriate term. That's terrible.
So far, the list that I've seen, it has been primarily female celebrities, politicians, naming big names, but it's not just a celebrity culture that people are doing this. This is now happening to everyday individuals. The difficulty is those images are then out there.
And of course, what may appear on the surface to be quite innocent, actually on closer examination is not. So I have seen, for example, reports pretty sure concerning online dating or online, for want of, I think to use the correct term, hookups, let's be grown up about it, where people have taken not just necessarily the profiles of people that they consider to be attractive, but also their features, their sort of, features of their body, so to speak, and, substituted those for their own in order to present themselves as being a more attractive proposition. And you think, well, yeah, where's this going? What next? And of course, effectively they are taking without permission the attributes of that person, not just their, the attributes of their makeup, so to speak, but also their physical attributes. They're literally taking without consent all the sorts of different aspects that made up that human being. And so it is a form of exploitation, isn't it, as well as a deception.
Yeah, and I mean, the statistics that are coming out now, and we're probably a bit behind times in knowing the true extent of this, is that 90% of the face, app changes that are going on these videos that end up being pornography videos, apparently 90% of those aren't consensual. The person that is featuring in that video or whose face is now being put into that video probably has no idea. And then we are in this position where we've talked about this numerous times before. Is this then part of revenge porn? Are you, waking up and somebody saying to you, oh, I've seen this video of you on the internet, and technology is very good today, so people may not realize that this is just an app. This is not you. And again, as we've talked about with revenge porn previously, it then may be on numerous different websites, and then you have the problem of trying to prove to this website that you haven't consented and then get it removed. It's just a real minefield for somebody that this happens to.
And I think those who do this, who are taking images and using them for their own purposes, need to be conscious that actually there may not only be a criminal liability, but also a civil liability. I'm in the process of settling a case as we speak where the tort of deceit has been the main route that we've travelled down in order to get our clients compensation. Deceit means deceit, deceiving. And those who decide to take photographs of other people and use them for their own purposes need to be very careful that they themselves are not going to fall foul of the tort of deceit, because if they are deceiving, then, as I said, there may not only be criminal offences being committed, but they may well be liable in civil law to pay compensation to those that they have exploited.
I think much more is going to come of this. As we've talked about numerous times, technology is so fast-paced moving at this time. The laws, they struggle to keep up, I think. That a number of the main platforms for social media, such as Pornhub, Facebook, Twitter, they've tried to ban this type of intelligence, I guess. And so, they are also looked at heavily with the legislation and what they're doing to make sure that this isn't going online as much as possible. But yes, I think the individual themselves that are doing this, hopefully, will be looked at. And going forward, there will be changes in the law, and hopefully this will form part of any revenge porn legislation that will come out.
Yes, and I think you have brought to my attention the fact that a young man was jailed for 16 weeks or so in order to pay compensation for photoshopping pictures of a female intern. So that, I think, serves as a sharp reminder that behaving in this particular way has painful consequences.
Yeah, most definitely. And there's also a campaign called My Image, My Choice, which is running at the moment. And I think they offer some guidance and support. But, as we always say, if you've got any concerns that something's involving yourself, contact the website that this is on if you know, and tell them that you haven't consented to this. And of course, contact police and contact solicitors to see if they can offer you some guidance on it.
Yeah, depending on the circumstances, there are long-standing legal remedies that victims can use, but it does sound as though legislators at Westminster need to be looking at legislation, seeing if it needs to be updated. And I think you also mentioned that the UK Law Commission may be doing some work in this area too.
Yeah. But I think that the point is because it's tech, again, it's almost got to be a global stance, because the laws at the moment vary. The United States have got a different stance on it compared to the UK, compared to places like China, because there's a different impact. But, there are victims in all these countries. Celebrities have come out in all of these countries that have been impacted by it. So there needs to be a strong stance, because obviously social media doesn't have boundaries, really, does it, on where they're based anymore?
No, it's fantastic what's been achieved in this world over, the last couple of years. And of course, during our pandemic, we've been so dependent on the internet and social media and all the various developments in order to carry on, so to speak. It's just been incredible, and it's astonishing what's been achieved. But with all these advancements, there is clearly considerable risks and great scope for misuse and the causing of much mischief.
Yeah, the dark side, yeah.
The dark side. Thank you very much. Thank you for suggesting this as a podcast topic. As always, thank you, listeners. If you have any suggestions for a future podcast, then please contact Danny or myself. If you would like to take part in a podcast with Danny and myself, please do volunteer. We're always looking for guests. And if you would like to be a guest on one of our podcasts, then we would be delighted to have you on. So thank you very much. And please do join us next week for our next podcast. Thanks, Danny.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you for listening to this episode of HJ Talks About Abuse. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favourite podcast player. If you'd like to speak to us about something you've heard today, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at aboutabuse@hjtalks.co.uk.